test, test, test. Good morning, wanderers. I let that roll for a few moments there when I first walked out here because I felt like I heard loons calling from the far end of the lake, which isn't a call I hear very often, but wow, is it incredible. The song of the loons, when in those rare moments that one can catch it, incredible. It was kind of far away, so I couldn't exactly tell if that's what I was hearing, but at the very beginning of this stream, you might be able to catch a loon song. I'm gonna run it back myself and see if I got one of those on tape. That'd be great. They are rare and magical finds. I am Oz, and we are live, lakeside, outside, for today's broadcast of Wanderer Radio. Today I'm talking about the idea why kings demand meals, and there's some interesting things in this because it leads us to ask first and foremost why we would kneel in prayer in the first place. And just a little spoiler alert, I suppose it is not because the Creator is more divine. So here on Wanderer Radio, we are going to explore this and explore the origins. You hear this all the time on Game of Thrones. God, they did this so much. Bend the knee. Did you bend the knee? Who bent the knee? Is this one going to bend the knee? They would always say that, bend the knee. And of course, it's a reference to a kneeling of one perhaps would-be king before the other two then will be, as a consequence of the kneel. It's regarded in some ways, it's regarded as a submissive posture, a posture that is honoring something. Culturally, it's come to mean, I believe, in a distorted fashion, something more divine. And so the king asks this. The king says, if you kneel before that which you consider of greater divinity, then why aren't you kneeling before me? And this, of course, to this day, hijinks of such nature ensue. Why does one kneel when they pray in the first place? If I'm suggesting that greater divinity is a distortion, then how did it start? What were people doing? Why did people do this? Why do they assume a kneeling position to pray? The reason one assumes a kneeling position to pray is the exact same reason a Tibetan monk folds its his or her legs into are there female Tibetan monks? I don't know. Anyway, folds the legs into a lotus position. The commonality here is that in both cases, the meditator and the prayer, both of them break their legs at the knees, collapse down to engage in the practice. Why? Kneeling when one is praying has an intention behind it. The intention of the kneeling is to stop. Stop what you are doing. Stop all of this engagement with the 3D world of man. I'm going to do this, and I got to get this done, and I need to see and be seen, and I am a mover and a shaker and a doer, and I'm doing and I'm doing and I'm doing and I'm doing and I'm doing. The world of man is an illusion. And the very first efforts to enter a prayerful state start with the most fundamental concept. Stop that. Stop doing that. Oh man, there's a bunch of geese coming this way. This could be a good show. All right. I think we have our answer there. I think it was a goose song when I first came out here, not loons. Wow, they're going nuts. So the purpose of the kneeling is profoundly simple. It's hard to engage with the non-material while we're engaging with the material. It is hard to engage with the non-physical when we are engaging with the physical. So the physical material world of man calls for all of this doing and this stuff and the going and the doing. We need to break our legs, said the first of the third density entities to become exhausted with the 3D spiritual energy drain of man's world. We need to break our legs at the knees and stay where we are. Stop moving for 5 minutes and close the eyes. That's it. The kneeling position is no different than the lotus position. If it would seem odd to you that one would assume a lotus position before a king in their royal court, if that sounds odd, the kneeling is no different in truth. Stillness. The 3D world of man is the opposite of stillness. It's pure kinetic energy going all the time, endlessly, infinitely, and it's on offer for all of the activity that you want to engage in. But stillness is, in a sense, the opposite. In a way, to kneel down and close your eyes, to sit in a lotus position and close your eyes, what could be more of an affront to the idea of man's world? You need to get up and work. You need to be out there from sunrise to sundown. You wake up, you go to work, you come home from work, and you go to sleep. Work ethic. So, in a way, it is a quintessential initial act of resistance, an act of defiance. In a way, it's a way of, it's a way, it's sort of an insult to man's world, I guess. In a way, you could sort of see it as an insult. And maybe it's not intended to be an insult, but it's not a problem for the one who, if someone were to say, well, you're insulting the world of man. How dare you not work from sunrise to sunset? How dare you not be active and on the go? Why don't you have tennis lessons? Why aren't you joining a book club? Why aren't you, what is it? Why are you, God, what are you doing with your time? So the opportunity to attain stillness, hopefully silence, willful efforts to withdraw from man's world in order to commune with the Creator. So why was it not more divine? Or why is it not an act of acknowledging greater divinity? Why am I asserting that that is a distortion? Because the truth is, you cannot pray to greater divinity. There is no such thing. There is nothing more divine than you. You are made of God. You are existing within the mind of the Creator. Your mind is Creator. The illusion is the activity, but you are both the participant in the activity and the Creator. These are not two distinct entities. These are two different aspects of your one mind, the infinite aspect and the finite aspect. You pray to you. You talk to yourself. Your finite aspect communes with your infinite aspect, but they're both you. You can't not be less divine than your Creator, nor can anybody or anything else be. As the saying goes, God is the only one here. And of course, by extension, you are the only one here. When you are seeing all this through the lens of your infinite aspect, when you see all this through the lens of your finite aspect, you are one among many. So if all we're doing is talking to ourself, what is the point? There is a point, or can be, for those who place meaning in it. It does have a point, and the point is exactly the same as the reasoning by which you might have a conversation with yourself in the morning as you're figuring out what to do with your day. You might start, who knows, you might start saying it out loud. You're using either your outside or your inside voice, but the conversation is probably the same. And something like, well, I got to do this and I got to go over here, but then I also have to do that. Which thing is more important? Which thing can I do later? And the reason that you're doing that is it's an effort to take a whole bunch of floating points, a whole bunch of nebulous stuff, all of these activities that you could do, and you're trying to suss out in a back and forth vacillation how to organize this, crystallize it into that which is your most preferred. In that same way, your finite aspect, or in other words, the you that's having this experience, and your infinite aspect both have awareness of different things. And therefore, an act of praying is actually an act of trying to get your finite aspect and your infinite aspect on the same page. You can think about that as people often approach prayer in terms of form. In other words, saying, I want to meet somebody to fall in love, or I want a new job. So we're talking about man's world stuff. So you can try to coordinate your finite aspect with your infinite aspect toward your goal of finding a relationship or getting a job. But that always tends to be a little bit nebulous as to how that pans out. Not to say it doesn't work, but people often see the workings as mysterious ways because it doesn't unfold exactly as expected. It's not like it just, you know, you try to get on the same page about certain really specific things you want to happen, and those things don't happen, but something else does. And in hindsight, you kind of see it as an answer to the same call that you made. Perhaps you see it as an even better answer. So in a lot of cases, the mysterious ways break in your favor, and the mysterious result is better than whatever you were asking for. So I think in truth, the forms are probably lost in translation anyway. What is being communicated is your awareness of who you are and your awareness of who the other is, or I guess in the case as I'm doing it, see there, I used distorted language myself there. No, it's an awareness of an aspect of who you are. An awareness of an aspect of who you are seeks to align in awareness with another aspect of who you are. And the aggregate result of this is that the mystery of the ways becomes less important if one starts to notice that regardless of the form, regardless of the way, there's a correlation between what answer shows up and the call that's being made. The correlation is not the forms, it's not the specific asks or the specific requests. The correlation is the state or the place that you are at, your current belief system. How much of your focus is love, for example, and how much is fear? So your infinite aspect, or a higher self, any level in between you and the infinite aspect, all of the levels above you, so to speak, uh, they are all very interested in answering your calls. But in the truest sense, The prayer itself and the answer to the prayer is I believe, in truth, strongest when you look not necessarily at the time one spends kneeling down and praying, but the very beingness of the person all the time. In other words, if there's an all day long frequency of love, mostly, and a small frequency of fear, that entity is just going to largely manifest an experience of love, experiences of love. None of us escape the most intense of catalysts, in other words, losing people in our lives or things like that. There's no escaping things like that, but of course our reaction to them can be different. And there is just one example. I've noticed this in my personal experience. That's just one example of the mysterious ways these things are answered. Because you might ask for these forms to never find you. I never want loss. I never want to experience loss. But we all know that it will find you. It finds us all. So that's actually not realistic. But the answer does come if one is seeking relief or peace or joy in the face of challenges like that. Those answers to those calls do come. But one of the perfect examples of it is give me a moment. I wandered off. Perhaps my infinite aspect was trying to tell me to stop for a moment in stillness and silence. Perhaps I'll find my way back in time. The point is that the stillness is the point, not the divinity. But what happened over time is that we distorted it. If we didn't understand this concept at the beginning, we forgot it. The idea that we are the infinite creator. We are the ones we've been waiting for. You are the one you've been waiting for. As we lost touch with that truth, we came to distort it as an idea that God or the creator is an entity of greater divinity than each of us. So certainly those praying contributed to the distortion. But once the distortion took hold, in other words, once we stopped understanding our divinity as one with our creator, once this idea took hold that kneeling was an act of subservience or the bowing of the head in order to acknowledge that a power has greater divinity than the prayer, that's when it evolved to the adaptation of bending the knee before the king. Because then the king is saying, well, if you're acknowledging your creator as a greater divinity than you, certainly you should bend your knee before me and acknowledge me as a greater divinity than you. You know, you won't hear modern day monarchs talking like that. They're not going to be over there at the royal palace saying, I am more divine than thou. But that's ultimately what the idea of bloodlines and monarchies and bloodlines is all about. Greater divinity being handed down through blood. Oh God, it sounds so absurd when one says it aloud, and yet monarchies have been around for thousands of years. Yeah. If a king asks you to kneel and you decide to do so as a matter of etiquette or protocol, let's say, the king might be sitting there thinking that in your doing so, you are acknowledging the king as a greater divinity. And the king might feel quite puffed up about his blood that's been passed down to him by generations of more divine people. So, uh, so as you are kneeling there, if you are doing so with the realization that this is the 3D man's world and it's all illusion and it's all a dream, and this is what another distorted, confused dreamer has asked you to do, because that allows them to make their dream make sense. And so you go, okay, here's the king, I'll kneel down. I mean, you don't roll your eyes in front of the king, they'll take your head off. But, inside you're like, whatever, I'll kneel down, bro. And so you kneel down. But as you're doing so, if you're doing so in full awareness that there is no hierarchy of divinity, and you are not, in fact, less divine than the king, because you're no less divine than your creator, that means you are actually existing in a less distorted truth than the king himself. Who is the exalted one in that scenario? Who's the exalted one in that scenario? Doesn't the shepherd boy ask the king, do you know what I know? There's a good chance the king doesn't, with all of the baubles on offer for the king. A lot of distractions. Hard to do the work of the soul as king. You in man's world now. Ah. See, when you get to the core of it, it's only the distortions that make these things different. Seen through a less distorted lens, the kneeling prayer looks exactly the same as the lotus meditator. And both are doing the exact same thing, aligning their finite aspect in their infinite aspect through will. I am Oz, and I thank you, wanderers, for joining me this morning live outside, lakeside, on today's broadcast of Wanderer Radio.